In 2003, there was a legitimate debate of who the best player in the NBA was, and among the names was Tracy McGrady, a young phenom that lit up defenses and left opponents wondering if there was any real way of stopping this guy. But just a few seasons later, he was forgotten and eventually couldn't find a spot on a roster. What really happened to Tracy McGrady's career? Now, believe it or not, Tracy McGrady was once on GOAT trajectory in his career. He was a force of nature unlike any the NBA had ever seen. Do you recall the one guy who pulled off a ridiculous 13 points in 33 seconds?
Brown lost it. Here comes McGrady. No timeouts remaining. McGrady for the win. Yeah!
The guy that always gave me the most problems on the court was Tracy McGrady. All the skills, all the athleticism, he was tough to figure out. Those were the words of the late great Kobe Bryant, who said consistently that T-Mac was the toughest player to guard for him. And if we learned a thing or two about the Mamba, it was that he rarely went out of his way to heap praise on a contemporary, especially considering the fact that the Kobe T-Mac debate over who was the best in the league was a serious hot topic in the early to mid 2000s. T-Mac was a significant prospect when he entered the NBA. He was one of the few players that jumped straight to the pros from high school. His talent couldn't be denied, and he was a 6'9" wing that literally had every tool in his toolbox that a coach could ever want in a player. The crossover, the mid-range, the three ball, finishing around the basket, literally everything. Now think about that for a second. Can you think of any other 6'9" shooting guard in the history of basketball that had that measure of an offensive package? The Toronto Raptors appeared to have the brightest young star in the league. Now, we love Mike and Kobe, but they weren't 6'9" like the force of nature that was Tracy McGrady. In his first couple of seasons in the NBA, T-Mac didn't receive starters minutes. In fact, he was barely logging more than 20 minutes of action every night. Come his third season in 1999, McGrady, who began to prove his abilities at the next level, was inserted into the starting lineup. In just over 31 minutes per game, T-Mac's scoring average ballooned to over 15 points per game. Still, at just 21 years old, it was clear that T-Mac hadn't quite reached his enormous potential. And during that season, however, a young T-Mac paired with Vince Carter proved to be one of the best young pairs of wing players the league could offer. Now, during that promising year for the young Raptors, T-Mac at some point during the season informed the Raptors that he likely wouldn't be with the team past the 1999 season. That news stung the fans in Canada and the Raptors. Toronto had spent years in mediocrity and were finally finding some sort of relevancy, just to later find out that their young dynamic duo wouldn't be together much longer. Now, when the summer of 2000 brought the looming free agency of T-Mac, he decided that he wanted to move close to home, joining the Orlando Magic to begin the next phase of his career. Now, his decision to depart from Toronto so soon in favor of Orlando proved to be an up and down decision in hindsight, but the next few seasons would elevate T-Mac into the same breath as some of the all-time greatest players ever. What he would go on to do would be something fans, peers, and contemporaries would all go on to marvel. The Magic were coming off an ugly 41-41 record in the 1999 season, and at this point, the Magic were years removed from their only finals appearance in their still very young history. And the loss of Shaquille O'Neal to the eventual dynasty Los Angeles Lakers was something fans were still bitter about. So, the addition of T-Mac brought on an enormous draw for basketball fans in the Sunshine State. And in the 2000-2001 season, T-Mac had officially arrived as a basketball superstar, posting a flattering 27 points per game and a team-leading 41 minutes every night. Although the Magic were still nothing impressive and still a far cry from their mid-90s team, and they made the playoffs for 3 straight seasons and looked to be a team on the rise. McGrady helped lead the way by winning consecutive scoring titles in 2002-03 and 2003-04. But in the 2003 season, the injury-ravaged Magic finished with a league-worst 21-61 record. It got to a point where the team endured a brutal 19-game losing streak, and suddenly it was familiar territory for the back-to-back scoring champ. He had enough of losing in Orlando. His fallout with the Magic organization legislated his request to be traded. Honoring his trade request, the Magic were forced to deal their superstar to the Houston Rockets without receiving comparable talent in return. T-Mac's tenure in Orlando was over. In his third chapter of his career, T-Mac for some time was still the great player we had seen in Orlando. Unfortunately, he never had another season that eclipsed his magical 02-03 season when he went for 32 points per game on 39% from three-point range. But he was still a superstar that was very much capable of changing the fortunes of a franchise. In his first season in Houston, T-Mac averaged just under 26 points per game for a Rockets team that had one of their best seasons in a while in 2004. Now, after a bad 2005 season that was derailed by injuries to key players, McGrady's Rockets were back on track in 2006 and certainly in 2007 when the Rockets ran off on 22 straight wins, one of the highest standing streaks in league history. All while this was happening, the Rockets couldn't muster any real playoff success. They were eliminated in the first round at the hands of the Utah Jazz consecutively in 2006 and 07. Although the team stayed competitive and had very good regular seasons, T-Mac's situation began to look more and more alarming. The Rockets were obviously winning, having one of the most iconic regular seasons by a team even in 2007 and 08, but it was that same season that T-Mac's numbers dropped across the board. His scoring average plunged to 21.6 points per game with below average shooting marks. McGrady shot under 70% from the stripe for the first time ever and was shooting sub 30% from three. So instead, the face of the team was slowly becoming Yao Ming, a 7'5" big with an uncharted feel for shooting the basketball from the perimeter. Everyone was wondering, was T-Mac suddenly declining at just 28 years old? Is this really the same guy that was scoring 32 points per game and lighting defenses up just a couple of seasons earlier? The apprehension among Houston fans and their organization was justified. Had they received the same explosive T-Mac from a few seasons ago during 07 and 08, there would be no telling how much the Rockets would achieve in the mid to late 2000s. Remember, even with T-Mac beginning to look like a shell of his former self, the Rockets still put together a few 50-plus win seasons and, of course, recorded that insane 22-game win streak. What was beginning to happen to T-Mac was something that began to emerge several seasons earlier. It turns out, T-Mac informed team trainers and the medical staff of severe back spasms he experienced during parts of the 04 season and throughout the 05 season. Back spasms became such an extreme issue that T-Mac admitted he would never be the same anymore early in the 2006 season. T-Mac missed a rather inconsequential 7 games due to the injury, leading many to dismiss the injury as just wear and tear. And T-Mac's decline was hidden in the shadows of the team's 22 straight wins. And with the starring of international sensation Yao Ming, the inevitable end of the T-Mac Houston era was quite dispirited. Yao's brilliance lifted Houston to relevancy for years to come. Even at the end of T-Mac's time there, the Rockets were winning in spite of their declining superstar. A serious knee injury hampered T-Mac's 2008 season, and in the end, proved to soon be the final straw for T-Mac, not just in Houston, but as an NBA superstar. And just a few games into the 2009 season, McGrady was clearly no longer the same player he once was. He battled a mix of minor and major injuries that just wouldn't allow him to perform to the level he was capable of. The Rockets permitted Grady to an indefinite leave a quarter into the season and made it known to the public that they were seeking to move McGrady in a trade. Just a heartbreaking turn of events for the once back-to-back scoring champ. He scored 2 points in his last game as a Rocket. After some time away, McGrady played one season for the Detroit Pistons, averaging around 8 points per game. After the Pistons let him go, he had a very short stint in Atlanta where he hardly saw the floor. That's just how precious life is as an NBA superstar. If you aren't careful, things will turn all the way around on you in a blink of an eye. Unfortunately for McGrady, he was on the receiving end of one of the greatest what-if stories in NBA history. By his own admission, T-Mac never kept himself in the shape that he needed for a pro athlete to perform at a level for a number of years. Had he not had his battles with back spasms, his career would have likely prolonged into the 2010s and would have given him the unique opportunity of racking up more statistical feats and accolades. His talent could never be denied. He actually was neck and neck with Kobe for the best in the game, despite the fact that Kobe was on his way to winning 3 straight championships. But it's fair to say, injuries not only robbed T-Mac of his greatness, but also robbed us fans of witnessing the career of a special player that could have challenged as the best player in the 2000s decade. Even throughout his injury-riddled career, the Hall of Famer collected 7 All-NBA and 7 All-Star selections. He was the real deal from 2000 to 2006, just special. He was the engineer of the greatest 33-second stretch in NBA history. If T-Mac didn't help revolutionize the wing position, he at least introduced the demand for strong, long, and physical shooting guards that can shoot it and guard 1 through 3. What he would have accomplished if his career wasn't cut short is something we can't say for certain, but it'll probably be a while until we see a player come around with the complete size and scoring package of the great Tracy McGrady.